Welcome in to a bonus edition of the Rochford Files. Coming to you from your host that's kind of between the coast, live from the Mile Highland City. It's Andrew Rochford, live from the garden of YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. And reason why tonight is doing a bonus stream tonight because I figured it was important to talk about this whole discourse surrounding Jimmy Dore considering a presidential run. Then we're working some Cenk Uygur and Vince McMahon. And the reason why I'm doing this tonight, giving you a bonus stream, is because with tomorrow's show, I probably won't be able to have the opportunity to talk about this stuff because tomorrow night's show gonna have friend of the show Sonny K return. In addition to that, we'll also have Jesse Jett on for the first time, so a little music connection there. And also Cy Lawson, one half of the political matrix, will be the fourth guy in tomorrow night as well, shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be cutting that real close because I'll be getting a haircut about a half hour before then. So hopefully I can get that done in time to start this show as I expect. So I got a little extra throw in to the mix as well. So yesterday, Jimmy Dore confirms that he's considering a presidential run as he went on for the first hour or so on Sabby Sabs last night. And when one of the last things Sabrina asked him about was whether that was true. So let's go to a little 2-minute clip that Compton J of the Revolutionary Blackout Network shared. So let's get that.
I have to ask, and I want to hear it from you. Are you considering running in 2024?
So I'm considering it, right? Because I wish there was someone like me running. That, I mean, in the sense that they had the message of don't blame your neighbor. Your neighbor is being oppressed by the same motherfuckers that you are being, that is oppressing you, right? They're on the same boot that came down during COVID on you, came down on your neighbor. It's not their fault. It's the oligarchy's fault, who, by the way, have been lying to you and funneling money upward through this COVID all the way through it. You know, just little things like, why can't I buy a baseball mitt where there's one guy working at my local sporting goods store on the corner, but I can buy one from Amazon when they got 1,000 people working inside of it? But you know what I mean? During COVID, when it started, so why was Target and Amazon and all those and Walmart, why were they allowed to stay open, but everybody's pizza joint had to, you know what I mean? It's like these, we weren't allowed to have these conversations. And now we find out that it was all, they were lying at every turn. And, you know, I just, anyway, so I hope someone like me who doesn't, what Christian Smalls did is what needs to be done. And that's what, as soon as you try to do that, that's what wakes them up. What I mean is, as soon as you organize along class lines, Christian Smalls, when he was on my show, I said, you know, that Amazon warehouse that you organized, that's in Staten Island. Now, did you just do it with the lefty liberals, or because it's all, there's lots of Trumpers there. There's lots of, that's Staten Island. I know who lives in Staten Island. And he said, no, I had to organize with all. Of course, that's how you organize.
And he is right about one thing. There is no potential candidate right now who is actually going to talk about a campaign that goes along class lines. I mean, Bernie Sanders, the past couple campaigns, he gave people this false illusion, a false hope behind the idea of a that right there is definitely going to be interesting to see if he is serious about this, what issues he would choose to run on, because there's always going to be like a bit of this complicated association when it comes to the People's Party. Let's be honest. The People's Party has not really inspired this sort of uprising to get people enthusiastic about trying to change the whole political system. But at the same time, when it comes to people who have gotten, more down on the idea of this whole third party thing, and you're more into the idea of direct action, then the whole I don't take that stuff quite as seriously if you are just gonna show your dissent from one of the two major parties and you just need some type of quality option to the left of the Democrats to make it count, even if they refuse to adjust to it, then you really don't have to do much outside of pushing for the whole campaign, pushing to you use your vote as a leverage sort of thing. And I think when we get now, you're going to see some of the discourse here has really gotten pretty ridiculous, especially from these fake ass left who will use this as a moment to clown Jimmy Dore just because now at a crossroads where you're so frustrated with not feeling like there's anything out there to any type of hope to challenge these two shitty right-wing capitalist parties in 2024. And there's going to be people who are still going to leave their hopes and dreams within the Democratic Party. And that's a flat-out nihilistic way of thinking. Because, let's be real, those people who hate the idea of Jimmy Dore running for president and at the same time are going to clown him because he has no chance of winning are also the same ones who hold a much more nihilistic view towards electoralism, towards the whole direct action and change, because they have gotten themselves so hitched to the belief that the only way that change can ever happen is through forming the Democratic Party. And that's a pretty broken way of thinking about it. So I think before we dive into taking a look at the discourse surrounding this, I think I'll go through a bit of the paragraphs from the People's Party website on this whole Jimmy Dore thing. And I'm not someone who's going to be head over heels over this like a Jackson Hinkle, but I'm also not going to be like someone who's using this to try to dunk on him like a Sam Cedar or TYT type either. I'm not going to place this on a higher pedestal than it needs to be. And I'm also not like trying to stomp on it relentlessly either. Jimmy Dore is considering running for president. He could win. It's a dark time in America, and it's getting worse. Millions lack food and health care and live paycheck to paycheck. Poverty wages now gutted by inflation. Eviction and homelessness sweep every city. Desperation so deep it drives people to opioid addiction and mass murder suicide. The looming fall of the dollar and depression. A dying empire lashing out for war with not one but two nuclear powers. The major left-wing party in this country leading the change for annihilation and censorship. Thankfully, I and many others have found real hope and joy in the prospect that Jimmy Dore could run for president of the United States. Jimmy has been considering a run, as he confirmed on Savvy Sabs last night. The crowds in Des Moines, Omaha, and Kansas City erupted in cheers when Jimmy surprised everyone at his live stand-up shows last month. He said, "I'm thinking of running for president," and took town hall-style questions for the first time. That weekend, Jackson Hinkle told him he should run for president live on Jimmy's show, and Jimmy said he's considering it. Then Jimmy asked Chris Hedges what would happen if he was to run for president on air, and on June 3rd, Jimmy and Steph in studio, he was there, told him and all their supporters why he needs to run. We discussed it for the last half of the segment with Jackson and Kurt Metzger weighing in. The next day, Jimmy uploaded the whole conversation on YouTube. Jimmy would be the most popular comedian to ever run for president. That's where that wouldn't be true. Either way, it doesn't really matter, but the point is there'd be several others, but it's also not a point to use as an attack to discourage him to tear down this thought process by him either. We believe Jimmy could win. That's being over-optimistic. Jimmy could win by using the campaign to organize direct actions. If there is one criticism about the People's Party, is they haven't really done much in terms of direct actions. They made a couple attempts last year to do direct actions in relation to the eviction crisis. So even though they've had their fair share of organizational structure problems, they were right to make the attempt to try to get a direct action going off the ground. So and they shared a tweet from Jackson Hinkle. If you watched the segment last night on The Dive, you'll notice that Jackson was pretty much head over heels over this idea of Jimmy Dore running for president. I think that he wasn't being realistic enough here. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, they cite this Hill thing, and it's always interesting because these type of moments give pretty much anyone who hates the two-party system a sense of false hope because of the fact that the real numbers when it comes down to the actual voting process are far lower than what these polling numbers show, like the 58% of people who are open to backing independent candidates. Because what we saw in 2020 was Howard Hawkins only got a whopping 0.3% of the votes. Then when you look at the Libertarian Party, I think, if I remember correctly, Joe Jurgensen only got like 1.4% of the vote after Gary Johnson was in the 4%. during the 2016 election. So even though I'm about hope for a left-wing third party, it's doesn't look good when also the biggest right-wing third party has that type of 3% drop in votes either. Even though it was still enough to help Biden pull away in those close states. Let's see, is there anything else? But no, I don't think there's anything else I really want to read from that article because of the fact that we know Nick Brana is also trying to paint that overly optimistic picture when it comes to Jimmy Dore. And let's be honest, it's going to be a really uphill battle for someone like Jimmy Dore to get the 5% of votes, if that was the goal. Even though it's honestly going to take a multitude of quality left-wing third-party candidates to put enough votes on the scoreboard. So when we reference back to the Lawrence O'Donnell clip where he says that you have to show the Democratic Party that you're capable of not voting for them. It may not be just someone like Jimmy Dore alone. Hell, it may not even be someone like Jesse Ventura alone. But the point is, it's going to lead to some really shitty discourse along the way. Let's pull up. Well, let's just go through what I see on Twitter when I just pull up a search on Jimmy Dore right now. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to do a segment on that later. Not related. This is a good one from Ricky Rant's earlier retweet of mine. And I think I'll use Ricky Rant's tweet to go further into a point myself. People who identify as, quote, leftists, but voted for right-wing authoritarian Joe Biden are mad that Jimmy Dore may be running for president. LOL, yeah, okay. Seriously. This is how broken people's brains are with this whole election. You're seriously going to be more outraged at Jimmy Dore running for president than you ever were for Joe Biden. In fact, people like that were the ones who were telling us that we had to vote for Joe Biden. What's pathetic is these asswipes are the ones who hold the idea of voting for Jimmy Dore in a higher contempt than the man who created the crime bill, the predatory loan industry. He was the one who paved the way for much of the systemic racism that exists today. So you can make yourself feel okay about voting for Joe Biden, but you consider Jimmy Dore a guy who isn't a politician, a guy who hasn't had any political power to make people's lives better or worse. Such a terrible idea when you've rationalized voting blue no matter who for people who uphold a system of white supremacy like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and many more of these potential future candidates like Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, you name it. That's why these clowns are so unserious. They treat Jimmy Dore like he has a mountain of problematic things about him, when it's really the Democrats and the Republicans who have built mountains upon mountains of extremely problematic things to the working class. And this guy, Jimmy Dore, is actually someone who wants to talk about challenging the powerful in society. But these are also the people who are still caught in the left-right game. And these people say, oh, we do need to try to form some coalitions with the right. But anytime you make an attempt to coalesce with someone on the right, they're be the first to tell you, not like that. Not like that. And that tells me that these people try to tell you, some of them that is, that they are organizers, but are they really? Because if you talk to someone that you don't agree with politically, you're obviously not going to try to use all the lefty labels with them in order to pull them into your direction on the issue, because that's an example of getting away from the left-right game, is dropping the labels and just get people to move to where you are on the issues. And there's a reason why Jimmy Dore has managed to have success with the right. It's because he has successfully gotten some people pulled in his direction on issues. And for as much criticism as he takes for it, he is willing to allow people on his platform who are not in agreement with him. I mean, a recent example was when he had that libertarian economist Peter Schiff on the show. I mean, I do not hardly agree with anything that he said, other than the rich being problematic for the conditions that they've created for this recession and the ongoing inflation. That is the only thing that he, in my mind, correctly analyzed. Everything else, totally wrong. Very much so. Then the other part is people are more upset with Jimmy Dore at the fact that he talked to a Boogaloo Boy, Magnus Panvidia, than the fact that Joe Biden is adding more funding to the police, trying to make the police state more powerful, calling for more censorship, and adding to the deep state powers. See why these people, Jimmy Dore arrangement syndrome, is so unserious, and they're not focused on the real things that matter here. I can acknowledge his flaws. He's not as good on the LGBTQ community as he could be. But it's also like the ways that they tried to smear Bernie Sanders' campaign with the whole, even though he wasn't for reparations, and that's absolutely not good that he wasn't. He still had better policies that he was talking about in his campaign, and also no one else was for reparations either. But even with that, even though that's not the best example to use, and the K-Hive types were trying to call the left racist for not voting for the ticket with the black female VP. But we voted. But if he voted Green Party and Angela Walker, a black woman, also the VP candidate, but she was for reparations, unlike Kamala Harris. So there. Let's see what else comes up on. And yes, this is another one of the serfs, one of these platforms who is obsessed with building his brand on Jimmy Dore hate. And because every time Jimmy Dore releases his shit to YouTube, you can always count on Lance to make a hate reaction video to him. And I haven't even bothered to watch a single one. But the truth is, that's how they go. And we know that Sam Cedar is absolutely going to use this to further build his brand, because a big part of his brand is his obsession with hating Jimmy Dore. And in this post from Compton J, Jimmy Dore actually replied to this, saying that he hopes Chris Hedges runs for president. And even though I doubt Chris Hedges would, he would be a very, very good choice, and probably be one of the best options at this time to run a third-party campaign in order to try to pull people away, just enough to get people to try the idea of trying to slowly shift one of these parties back towards the left. And yes, these Democratic Party reformist leftists will never entertain the possibility that it could be the Republican Party that shifts left instead. I mean, look, the parties already had a shift or back in like the 60s, and it would be a brain shock to these party reformists if we saw another type of switch happen again, except this time it was progressives and maybe some of the more who made the switch to the Republican Party, while more of your rhino types switched to Democrats. So a party switch is something that could possibly happen, and it could honestly come sooner than a powerful third party. Let's continue going. A lot more. And Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report. He's gone from someone who used to be, who had a good working relationship with Jimmy, and pretty much after Force the Vote last year, he turned on him. And it's always, you notice how whenever someone turns on Jimmy Dore, it's always Jimmy that gets the blame for it. I mean, it happened with Mike. he got the blame for when Kyle turned on him, and Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. He's getting the blame when Graham Elwood turned on him following their uh, pro anti-mandate debate. But the thing was, Jimmy wasn't going to end his friendship over that disagreement with him. It was Graham who did it. And then going further, more recently, for some reason, Benjamin Norton took issue with the way that Jimmy and Max were covering COVID and decided to leave the gray zone. And even though neither side has really said much, recently Jimmy took a shot back at Ben when Danny Haifong promoted some type of event where Ben was speaking on. So once again, for as often as Jimmy gets painted as a guy who cannot maintain friendships with people who have some disagreements with him. I mean, look at Aaron Mate. Him and Jimmy are still have a good working relationship, and Aaron has takes on COVID that are pretty similar to a Graham or a Ben, and they still maintain that working relationship because even in spite of that disagreement, they still come together to make good discussion on anti-imperialism. See, keep going down. Radical leftist agenda. Let's read her tweet out. Jimmy Dore is really running for president. He should run as an independent. Movement for People's Party is sus as fuck, and I understand it if you don't agree with me, but Nick Brana just gives me a bad gut feeling. To be honest, I think this thing is to just literally troll Jordan Sheraton. And I think many of us have acknowledged, even in spite of the fact that we are mad about the idea of Jimmy running, but we would be questioning the whole association with Nick Brana. In addition to that, and if Nick was closely tied to Jimmy, that would probably suppress some of his support, because even people who get strawmanned as being majorly pro People's Party, like the people at the MCFC network, that's a common group of people who get labeled as being major pro People's Party types, but just about all of them there are down on the People's Party, and there's been nothing that inspires them, all the way down from Nico House, Fiorella Isabel, Pasta Jardula, Steve Poikonen, Glory Jones, Misty Winson, Frank Analysis. Not a single one of those people are optimistic or overly head over heels over People's Party. And that's going to be a one of those forks in the road if this is something that seriously happens. Then we see another person, Jordan Sheraton, who has gotten pretty deranged who's really turned into a major derangement. LOL, MPPP grift is complete with draft Jimmy Dore. For your information, MPP sources told me Nick Brana had been floating this as a far back as last year, while also pushing for MPP's message to copy Dore. Donors unfortunately thought they were building a real third party. And this gets me into the next point. Think about how clownish it is to complain about grift from a third party when there's much huger and larger fucking grifts that exist. You know, that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the military industrial complex, prison industrial complex, the police state, all far bigger grifts. Not all deserve way more focus and attention. And for the record, I believe that you are capable of voting for someone flawed third party candidate while also not donating to them. And even with as tough as the idea sounds in concept, you can campaign with limited funding. And that's what I hope happens here, because I'm not donating to anything, to be honest. There's not even anything within the third party sphere that would inspire me enough to donate to it. I'm keeping whatever future donations I make exclusively to direct action and mutual aid. So I do believe that even if this is a serious and solid campaign that takes off the ground, that I could still support someone without having to donate for them. And that's why that's a good example of annoying clown discourse there, because uh, you're more upset about a potential grift from a random political commentator with no power, by the way, than you are of the political system that continuously prints fucking money out of the sky and giving another $1 billion for weapons in Ukraine. There's real shit to be upset about here. And it's not the fact that someone like Jimmy Dore is so frustrated with what the system presents at the current time that he hopes to do something small that he could to change it. Then this eclectic radical Chris Richards guy is another example of a guy who's far more obsessed with feeling like he has to attack guys like Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan rather than focus on the powerful and using the anti-facts based attacks. And there was a moment and that's another point of annoying discourse. You can be anti-mandate from the left, and you can do it in a sound way that doesn't get you straw-manned as being a right-winger. And I think Jeremy Corbyn, the progressive and the British progressive, showed an example of a good anti-mandate argument from the left. Nick Cruz of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, another example of sound anti-mandate argument. Even Danny Haifong makes a good anti-mandate argument, saying that, and it's all about, and for not to rehash that, but my stuff is always, I focus it all up on the powerful and not blame people with no power. Is there anything else here? Yes, this would be a hope. I don't care if you're someone who's on the left or someone that's on the right. 100% supporting Jimmy Dore for president. No other reason than it would make the worst people so extremely angry. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who have allowed people like Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan, to Russell Brand to live so rent free in their heads that they've lost the focus to be angry at the right people. And do they work in corporate media where they just act as extending propagandist for the oligarchy? No, even though Joe Rogan is so Russell Brand, they're far less agreeable in comparison to Jimmy, and they could sound like corporate media far more often, but they're still not in that sphere. And that's exactly what's happening. This tweet from Karen: say Jimmy Dore 3 times and watch a shithead lose their mind. I saw some other. Oh yeah, here's one. Colin Radix Carter of Indie News Network had a pretty good tweet. I don't understand why people are clutching their pearls that Jimmy Dore is thinking about running for president when people didn't bat an eye when Cenk Uygur ran for Congress. And that's a good point that Colin brings up to remind people about. And they try to use it as a way to try to tear down Jimmy's run because of the fact that he had a much more established infrastructure and far more subscribers through TYT and still got crushed really badly in a House seat. But they don't talk about how Bernie Sanders took away his endorsement for that horse-obsessed rat fuck. And these people are still that hate Jimmy Dore and still hold Cenk Uygur in higher regard. You've got to be kidding me. I've always found the communist types a bit weird who call everyone a liberal who isn't fully in their communist chamber, like this cold empanadas account. Jimmy is a liberal. Oh, hey, WCSN, I didn't see. Jimmy ousted himself as controlled opposition in 2020. Sorry to those that follow. Hope you're doing well. Thanks. And I'm not trying to. I'm taking the reasoned middle ground here when it comes to that. And hi, Varian, as well. I'm taking the reasonable middle ground here. I don't believe this whole third party thing is going to take off in such a way that a Jimmy describes it. But at the same time, he could play a role in help in the long process of helping one of the parties move back to the left. And I do think that for someone like me who's more kind of indifferent to the third party thing. I can understand why WCSN thinks of him as a controlled op. Because I'm not getting my hopes and dreams all up over this. But I'm also not going to attack him over this like some people. I mean, one last thing I'll touch on is, for example, I'm just looking forward to these bread tube fucks who are eventually going to try to get into unproductive bullshit discourse. Like, for example, if Jesse Ventura decides to run as well, imagine the amount of bullshit debates they're gonna try to have run so many fucking debates into the ground, trying to find someone who likes Jimmy Dore and someone who would be a Ventura supporter. And guess what they're gonna do with that? They're gonna try to wedge divides between those two groups of people, and they're gonna use that as a way to try to keep you from voting blue no matter who. So that's going to be extremely annoying when that happens, because you know that these people are going to try to get you riled up and divided over petty shit. It's one of the top things from the fucking CIA playbook. And we know that the bread tube is going to pull that shit. And I'm also not going to be someone who's going to tell you that they're going to pledge their vote this soon in the game. There's still well over 2 years before we get to that point. But get off of your high horse if you're going to act like you can't even acknowledge the fact that Jimmy Dore wouldn't be better than anyone in the oligarchy. That's some serious clown shit, and that dragged on quite a bit longer than I would have liked it to be. But I want to carry this over to a point that I made on my show one of the first times that I went in on David Sirota recently. And I want to get back to the whole nuance discourse before I talk about Cenk Uyghur's son. So yesterday we had this tweet from this guy, Michael McFall, who is some blue check CIA, some blue check neoliberal academia type. And here it is. Your criticisms of U.S. foreign policy will be more compelling to me if, one, you sometimes praised U.S. foreign policy, and you sometimes criticized other great powers. If the U.S. is always wrong, and Russia and China are never wrong, then maybe your analysis is biased. And that right there gets me to this point. I brought up the whole nuanced discourse about a couple weeks ago. And the thing is, when it comes to this is where the bastardization of nuance begins. It starts with these shit-lib, blue-check liberal types like this guy right here. For real now. They're the ones. This is the type of fucking influence that gets bread tubers to hedge on so many foreign policy issues. And about how people like Jackson Hinkle, the Gray Zone, are the ones who are definitely giving you more of a pro-Russia viewpoint of the situation. And given what you learn outside of the corporate media extremely pro-Ukraine narrative, it's definitely more, the Russian side of things is definitely more compelling. So are Russians really also a pro-imperialist oligarch when they're the ones who have turned into getting sanctioned to death by the United States and the other NATO allied countries? So does that mean that they can still be pro-imperialist when the argument is far stronger that Ukraine is acting more like the warmongering pro-imperialist country? Because look at the signs. US and NATO are exacerbating this inflation. They're causing the supply shortages to happen. You don't got a case for that argument if since Ukraine's not getting sanctioned by anyone. All Ukraine is getting is the tune of endless billions and billions of dollars from the United States, which could easily be used to mitigate inflation and potential supply problems. Investing in people here to help fill the gaps of supply shortages. Not in this country where, in this capitalist profit motive failed state known as the United States, they're just about finding the cheapest way possible and not about investing in their own. They'd rather put more resources into other countries. But we obviously know that your average breadtube types like Vaush, Destiny, Dylan Burns, they're always going to come up with a way to hedge on foreign policy issues in the name of nuance. And I've told you before what nuance really means. Nuance means you're not conceding enough in your viewpoints, and that when you're unrelenting and refusing to concede anything to this fucking empire of the US and its defense contractors, the military industrial complex, and they have the audacity to complain at the state of things that you're too biased. If anything, you're too biased if you can't break away from this line of thinking. And it's even infected the vanguard. Yes. In their live stream today, someone asked them about Jimmy Dore, Gray Zone, Jackson Hinkle. And this is why I have a problem with the vanguard nowadays. You saw that even though they were milquetoast for the new left, they were at least relatively solid, even if not spectacular, on most of the issues. But we noticed that the switch flipped on them once they did that whole softball interview with Ryan Grimm, and they couldn't handle Jimmy Dore giving any type of pushback. Then they got obsessed with changing their brand to being such anti-People's Party, and that's also extended to being extremely anti-Jackson Hinkle as well. And I think from their side of things, it's a weird way of doing it. And when it comes to Jackson, there are valid criticisms of Jackson from the left. And there are a few people who do have valid criticisms of him and the reasons why they don't like him, like Marcus Cage, Lucky Burrito. Those are a couple examples of people who have valid issues with him from the left. And Vanguard's, well, both sides actually have pretty weird reasons for disliking each other, to be honest. But the thing is, Vanguard even got into this whole hedgy argument. Like, oh, they didn't buy into the line of the denazification argument. And I still agree with that line of thinking that even if you're a similar type of capitalist country, it's no longer a good thing to have a line of to have a purity of not to be against Nazism. Even though capitalism and systemic racism are pretty well intertwined here, even if it's only like a virtue signal, being against Nazis is a good thing. Then the whole lacking a nuanced straw man that the guys from the Vanguard use by painting those people's coverage as just calling everyone in Ukraine Nazis. They clearly haven't paid closely attention enough, because it's clear that there's plenty of innocent Ukrainians who are being hurt by the decision of controlled Vladimir Zelensky and the United States, who keeps pumping all that money into their Nazi military, who has a disproportionate impact on that country, and how their use of Ukraine and the proxy war against Russia is hurting many innocent Ukrainian citizens. And that tells me that they clearly haven't caught on to that type of nuance that even the more pro-Russia labeled people do provide. And that includes Caleb Maupin, Gonzalo Lira. And that's, I just wanted to add on to that. And I did answer the one example of a country that there are other great foreign powers to criticize these days. Number one, Israel. And that's because Israel is the United States imperialist right-hand man. Then, number two on the list, they've recently cozied up real well to the United States, and that is Ukraine, the new imperialist left-hand man of the United States. Even though Ukraine is not a powerful country, They are a foreign power that is definitely worth criticizing. And it is easy to, when you have the shit-lit brain, it is easy to not get why people on the left never criticize Russia and China. And for good reason. It's because all the corporate media criticizes them for the wrong reasons. And you never hear any valid criticisms. And you really have to go to independent voices or people who have actual real experience with those countries to provide you with real and valid criticisms when it comes to Russia and China. Also, the DPRK, in addition to that, Cuba, many of the countries, those are like top. Venezuela, all top of the list of the U.S., the anti-U.S. corporate media agenda. So I had to call out the vanguard for that, especially since they just did that, their form of hedging on Russia and Ukraine earlier today. And they're like the ultimate milk toast bar for the so-called new left that we have here. And that's why I'm saying that even the bastardization of nuance can even come all the way over here, even to their point of the left. All right, so that was kind of an extra thing that I thrown in for this. So now it's a good point to shift gears to Cenk Uygur. And he had a moment where he did this Mediaite interview slamming fake progressives. So let's hear this little clip and see what he had to say.
The mainstream media is disgusting in how they shut out progressives. In terms of the right wing, no. Brianna Joy Gray, unfortunately, is one of the people that are in the fake left. And so this has become a whole niche part of the industry. So Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Brianna Joy Gray, and a couple of others in there that are, to be fair to Dave Rubin, he started this whole thing. The fake left saying, "Oh, well, it's just I'm a classical liberal, I'm a progressive, but it turns out the right wing's right about everything." Okay, so that's the shtick that they do, and they go on Tucker's show, and they dance for him, and so it's disgusting. They're not the real left, and here's how you can tell: they never disagree with them. The mainstream media is disgusting in how they shut out progressives.
Get a load of this clown shit from Cenk Uygur. For those of you who don't remember, this guy used to be a former Republican. Yes, in the same way that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, Cenk Uygur also switched parties as well. He went from being a son. Then he... Exactly, Chris. The projection is strong from chunk yogurt here. And yes, I have wanted to, one of these days, I'm going to Photoshop Cenk Uygur's head on Rudy Gobert. And I want to use that photo of Gobert when he has his hands on his head after some moment where Nikola Jokic had some I think it was that game where the Denver Nuggets beat the Utah Jazz on the second night of a back-to-back when they only had 7 healthy players. One of the highlights before of that Nuggets season before the shutdown for 3 months. And that was just a priceless photo. And one of these days, I'm going to Photoshop that big-ass head of Cenk Uygur on Rudy Gobert. Chunk yogurt. He's a blubbering tower who would get squashed in a wrestling match against Joe Rogan. And also, he would also get destroyed by Reef Breland as well. 2 people who would do that to him in a wrestling match. Back to the point at hand. He is one of the top examples of someone who cries about being right-wing. Whoo! The Avalanche just won Game 1 in overtime. Just under a minute and a half in. For those of you wondering. But the thing is, Cenk Uygur is far more closer to that Dave Rubin clown who isn't even worth my time. He has never once in the year plus since I've done this show been worthy of any single segment that I've done here on the Rochford Files. Yet for some reason, Dave Rubin lives really rent-free in the mind of Kyle Kulinski. Endless upon endless videos where there's still this mindset among that TYT Breaking Points Majority Report type of left is that you have to go out of your way to make content criticizing Republicans. Look, that stuff just comes organically. You don't have to force that shit. I mean, look at the Uvalde shooting recently. That gave ample amount of Republican critical material. We just don't have to go sift through Fox News clips to make sure we create ample time to criticize Republicans like these people feel that the real left has to do, because it's a more productive use of time to use that as an opportunity to try to pull the Democrats left any way possible. And that's going to naturally criticize Republicans as well in that process. Then he is the next of many to throw Brianna Joy Gray under the bus. And that is because Brianna Joy Gray is not for everyone. There's a lot of moments where she goes over the head of many people. And that's what happens when you're a Harvard-educated type like Brianna Joy Gray, is the fact that so you're going to make points that go over the head of people, and they're going to interpret them in far the wrong way. Just like when it comes to the reaching out to the right discourse, she's triggered plenty of many on that fake left, just because from what I understand about her, she's far more concerned. She's definitely more concerned about the white supremacist in suits that hold positions of political power than those uh, who are part of like the Proud Boys and the KKK and the other random white supremacist groups who are further empowered by political forces with actual power. Then the recent how she also broke people's brains recently just because she didn't uh, go all in on attacking Tucker Carlson over takes that he had during that Uvalde shooting. Then what we've also seen is shitlib types like Cenk Uygur have now turned their brand into calling people to the left of Cenk right wingers. And you're definitely very unserious if there's any part of you who believes Brianna Joy Gray is not left. Seriously. That's some donkey horse shit from a guy who has an actual horse obsession in Cenk Uygur. And he's doing this because he cannot carve out a successful. It goes against the grift of TYT trying to be pro-progressives, but then it extends into being vote blue no matter who. It is not the flex that you think it is. And he's also one of the biggest influences of trying to misguide the left and put them in a place to where they can have the potential to be in the right place for the direct actions, because these people are always trying to keep you away from them. Oh yeah, I gotta touch about Greenwald bit that I lost that from my brain from a moment. But yes, even with as much as Glenn Greenwald has changed, Cenk Uygur, you are still to Glenn Greenwald's right. And even though Glenn has a weird fetish these days for being really contrarian to the point of where it's where I find it to be a waste of time on his part to do that. Yes, Glenn Greenwald is still to your left. He is still far better on foreign policy than you are, Cenk Uygur. And you are one of the examples that ties back to my previous point of being this the bastardization of nuance, because you complain about people not being nuanced enough and calling them and your whole Russiagate derangement. You were harping on about how Russia is anti-LGBTQ, and that should be justification for being anti-Russia. Guess what? There's countries who are getting wrongfully attacked by the United States, and they're not as, and they're And they may be more socially conservative than we are. And that still doesn't make it right. Then going back to the whole Syria bullshit last, how they're so terrible on the issue of Syria. And they use that as a way to be anti-gray zone. So there's so much problematic shit from Cenk Uygur. And if you're garbage on foreign policy, then you don't get to call yourself to the left of anyone, even if they are more socially conservative than you virtue signal to be. Given where I'm at with the show, I think I can work the Vince McMahon story into tomorrow night's show, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern or shortly after, with Sonny K, Jesse Jet, and Variance Man Cy Lawson. So it'll be another fun BS type of stream. And I think I could work that Vince McMahon story into tomorrow's show. So I'm going to save it for then. So also, even though Kelly, who is a loyal viewer of the show, decided to skip that one, I think you'll be looking more forward to tomorrow's show. Please like, share, and subscribe. Shout out to the Reezy98 for becoming a new subscriber to the channel. And I will eventually, at some point, put more work into getting content on Rumble and Odyssey. I've been really lazy about that for about the past month. And I've also been lazy about sharing on my Facebook page, even though that gets no traction whatsoever. But tomorrow night's show will be a fun one. Sonny K, Jesse Jet, who will have some type of performance for the show tomorrow, and Cy Lawson. So it'll be good to get a little group stream going on. That way, hopefully I can get that'll bring in some new indie news network fans of the show. And I know that Cy's going to have some of his close peeps in on as well. So tomorrow's show should be a fun one. And you'll see me with a fresh new haircut. And if I'm slightly late to start the stream, that'll be why. But with that being said, this is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night.